This episode is proudly brought to you by the Afrocentric Group, Southern Africa's most diversified healthcare group, building a winning health offering. Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of AI Impact Talk with me, Tim Lemkhototo. So we've spent the last couple of months here on the program talking about AI, artificial intelligence, across various industries, mainly in the local context in South Africa, right? We've also taking a look at what's going on in neighboring countries and the broader African continent, etc. But today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by a guest who's got experience across not just the South African context, but also an eye on what's going on the continent, but also the rest of the world. That's a lot of alsos added before we bring him in. Who's better to talk us through AI and the advancements that are being made across the globe than President Ntuli? He's the head of HPE South Africa. Welcome, sir, to AI Impact Talk. We catch you at an interesting time because you've just come back from an international HPE gathering in the US. Give us your impression of what's come out of that and how you're feeling.
All right, great. First of all, thank you for having me in here. It's really a pleasure to be in here. So HPE Discover is HPE's annual event, flagship event where we talk to the industry, being our customers and partners about trends that are coming down the line and some of the technology refreshes that we're looking at, and certainly how they could use that to drive business growth. So this year was very interesting because, surprise, surprise, the biggest talk was still AI. It was AI last year. And I think this year as well, we announced more of AI and what we're doing together with our partners in NVIDIA in terms of driving that. Just to give you an idea, we had over 12,000 attendees in the Las Vegas Sphere, one of the biggest conferences, obviously, in the annual calendar in Las Vegas. So our CEO came out very clear. There's three key things that we focus on. First one, AI. The second one, hybrid cloud. And the third one, networking. So very interesting things that came out of there, and really looking forward to share that with a broader audience.
And you've seen HPE evolve, right, through many years. This is, I think, a brand new stint that you started the organization from, late 2023 is when your current appointment was made, correct?
Yeah, so I've been with HPE over 12 years. So I joined in 2009, had a bit of a break in between. I worked with one of the local system integrators, and since 2019, I've been back with HPE, first as managing director for the South African business, which I did for about 3 years. And for 2 years, the organization sent me to the UK. So physically relocated into the...
Out in the cold.
Out in the cold, in the United Kingdom, to bring some warmth, obviously, into that very cold place. But to run the HPE GreenLake cloud business for 2 years across UK, Ireland, Middle East and Africa, and that really gave me context in terms of what is happening somewhere else in the world. And for the last 18 months, back here in South Africa again to run the HPE business for them.
And I want to look at that, right? What that experience, especially moving between different parts of the world, has allowed you to do in terms of the assessment of HPE's offering and the demands of the market. How big a gap is that at the moment?
That's very interesting because if you look at the market in which I was covering, I covered the UK market, which is, you could argue a developed economy. Technology is advanced quite drastically in the UK. And I covered what could be, if you want to call it, the next wave of technology in the Middle East. Because if you look at what they're trying to do, they're actually trying to diversify away from oil, but focusing on technology as a differentiator and being globally competitive. So lots of investment in the Middle East from a technology perspective. And I covered Africa, which is where you and I actually are from. And maybe the best way to summarize Africa is massive potential. Massive potential in terms of number of people living in here, opportunity to leapfrog some of the European countries. So it's been quite an interesting experience that I had looking at the three different markets, if I may.
And how much of the opportunities, the potential, are still untapped in Africa?
Massive, right? So let's talk about the AI sort of economy. So by 2030, $15.7 trillion would have been generated through the AI ecosystem. So the unfortunate part is 70% of that will mainly be North America and China. No surprises there, which means for us to actually try and get a piece of that, we need to start building beyond 2030, and starting now beyond 2030, around how we can become globally competitive from an Africa perspective. So if you look at how AI has actually developed in Africa, between 1 and 1.5%, still very low. I look at it as a 98.5% opportunity for growth rather than being a less than 2% penetration, by the way. Yeah.
And do you think Africa can catch up, and not just catch up by being a follower, but also begin in some respects to maybe become a leader of the pack in the AI space?
I think we can catch up and lead by being unique, by being, developing AI solutions that are true to where we are. So with all the challenges that we have, including digital infrastructure, lack of connectivity, lack of uniform policy in most African countries, actually there are opportunities that lies around that, in that we can actually turn those challenges into opportunities. So I am hopeful that, if we come together as Africans and try drive sovereign AI to benefit us, to drive local innovation and driving that ecosystem for AI, that we can certainly become exporters of AI technologies rather than being consumers at this stage.
And what do we mean, President, by sovereign AI in the context of 2025?
Yeah.
And what is an ever-evolving space?
So the way to look at it is, and you may ask, why is sovereign AI critical? So first, if you think of the geopolitical arrangements that we have out there, it makes it so complex in terms of, as an example, where you will want your data to be stored, so within the boundaries or outside of the boundaries of your organization. So if you're in South Africa, you got to think, who is geopolitical friendly where I can be able to store my data and hopefully not have issues going forward. So, data security, data privacy and security is driving the need for sovereign AI. The need for local innovation is probably the third sort of opportunity that where people are looking at and saying, hey, if we come together, we can drive local innovation by actually building models we can control, and we can drive the narrative around AI, which will give us a competitive edge into the global
And do we in
economy.
South Africa and the rest of the continent then have the capacity to do that sort of hosting of data, etc.?
We potentially will going forward. I think if you drive on the N1, if you drive certainly to the airport, you will see data centers mushrooming from all over. That's a good start. With that, obviously, there are power challenges. We know we live in South Africa. So some of the things that we need to work to look at, because AI actually consumes a lot of power, consumes a lot of water, is the base infrastructure need to be ready for us to take advantage of this, because we're going to need massive data centers if we are to remain competitive in there. So although you're seeing a mushrooming and investment into the data center space, that needs to be supplemented by an intent in terms of building infrastructure and AI data facilities if we're to take advantage of growth in AI.
And what about digital literacy then? How do you rate South Africa in that space? And to what extent are the gaps as far as digital literacy holding us back?
Some work to do, to be honest. Yeah, I think some work to do. We need to introduce AI in our curriculum. We need to really introduce it at an elementary base all the way into universities. I was looking at the study the other day. Only 22% of African universities are offering some form of AI-related courses. I think we need to increase that, because that's a critical thing. I think the key thing here is skills gap and skills shortages. AI needs to be part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Is that lack or slow, let's say, uptake of education in AI, especially at tertiary level, is that because of a lack of knowledge among perhaps the academics themselves, or are people still intimidated by the very concept of what we're talking about?
I think two things. I think there's, if you look at what we're capable of producing as a country, certainly quite a lot. I mean, if you look at what the CSIR does, that's the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, does on a day-to-day basis, you'll be blown away with some of the innovations that you see in there. I like telling a story around tech because I studied finance. I did BCom in accounting, so not necessarily tech. And I had to fast track my progress around understanding technology. So it took a bit of investment from my perspective into actually ensuring that, I enable myself in understanding technology. So that's one. But also, I like also telling a story. When I went to university, I was seeing a computer for the first time because actually I was born, went to school in a rural area,
Right.
and I had to do programming in my first year. And I was actually seeing the PC for the first time. That was a little intimidating. So back to my point around, we actually need to introduce this technology as part of our curricula at a very elementary level, at an entry
So
level.
primary school level.
Primary school, to make it easy for us, for the young people. If we've got a high population, which is youth in South Africa, take advantage of that, ensure that no one is being left behind with technology and introducing that as part of our curricula in primary school.
How do we get that right in a South Africa where, for example, a school in Alexandra might not have the same budget as a private school in Sandton across the highway?
We need a national AI policy. We need to start there. We need government to actually drive the policy and make AI or make technology mandatory in schools and actually invest into that. And I think we've got potential in that. I think we've got, if you look at how much money we spent, you could argue as government, we could certainly channel some of the budget that is going into social spending into actually tech. So I think where there's a will, the opportunities will certainly arise. And I think it will need a bit of government taking direction. It will need a bit of private sectors also investing in those rural areas or in the semi-urban areas such as Alexander that might not necessarily have access to tech.
I'm glad you mentioned policy because it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
The very gray areas in terms of an actual policy on AI nationally for South Africa. Yes, we needed, for example, to give guidance on what to do at a basic education level, but for the industry itself, how much of a hindrance have those gray areas been?
Yeah, and that's a big talking point. Some of the developed economies, the UK as an example, had to develop their own AI policy and actually live it to it by investing billions and billions of dollars through their project called Islamabad AI. And you may ask, why are they doing it? They're doing it for economic growth. So they're not just investing in tech for the sake of driving tech. They're actually embedding AI and technology, you could argue digital transformation into every sector you can think of. So in agriculture, in schools and all of that. So investing in actually developing an AI policy becomes very critical because that becomes the foundation that you need to drive economic growth.
So in the interim then, does it become a matter of HPE, for example, partnering with an organization in another capital on the African continent, and so on, you add another part to the chain until ultimately the collaboration brings together a sort of united front that says this is Africa and this is our offering?
So with AI, you need an ecosystem. And, I'll give you an example of what we're doing with the likes of NVIDIA, which is known, obviously, as the producers of GPUs, is we're trying to say, how do we short-circuit AI deployment? So we came up with this reference architecture called HPE Private Cloud for AI that actually allows organizations to take advantage of our computing, our storage and networking together with NVIDIA software, with some of the ready-made NVIDIA frameworks to allow them to plug and play as they drive forward. That's one. We're also working with service providers and model builders because we just don't believe that everyone has to have their own LLM models. We do not believe everyone needs to train their own AI models. We think, there's an opportunity in driving AI at scale, and which is what service providers and model builders are doing. So we're working with them, assisting them together with NVIDIA in terms of driving that. We also have organizations that are obviously adopting AI. From a government perspective, data privacy becomes very key. So we've got AI for sovereign solutions that is purposely built for organizations such as government departments. Certainly the South African government can take advantage of that, where they want to ring fence the AI and data within the confines of government as well.
And in terms of getting Africa AI ready, for example, you were talking about putting plans in place to make sure that by 2030,
Yeah.
we are some distance from where we are currently.
Yeah.
Is that up to the policymakers, i.e., the politicians, or is it still a rich man's game where the big corporations would ultimately have to lead the charge?
I think it's every man's game. It's a responsibility of a corporate, certainly it's responsibility for our citizen, also responsibility of government. And there's interesting stories in Africa, so Vamba, AI, as well as Cassava, I was reading the other day, are actually investing in driving an African native large language models that will ensure that the AI models that are being built actually conform to our culture, take advantage of who we are as Africans, and that are uniquely African, so we can start driving a narrative around exporting AI. That was one. And there was an interesting story as well coming out of Rwanda, where this company called Zipline is working with the Rwandan government to make healthcare accessible to rural communities. They basically use drones to transport medical supplies. And where AI is being used in there is, check the weather patterns, make sure that the drone doesn't fall as it's going in there. So that's very interesting. And in Tunisia, a company called InstaDip, it's an interesting story where, you've got a UK biotech organization actually buying into an AI startup in an African continent and paying almost £500 million for that. That included over 290 AI skills. So what it is there's no lack of a will, and that's, to me, that's the private sector actually taking the forefront in actually bringing technology closer to the people, closer to government, and driving that. So we need to start somewhere, and we need to start today.
So what you've just listed as far as those examples from other countries on the continent leads to the other conversation about demystifying discussions around AI, because what those organizations have done in their respective countries is they've solved an everyday problem.
Yeah, and that's the whole discussion around social AI, right, which is quite critical, is where we actually using AI to improve education. That's a key one, because that's one of the social ills, there's lack of knowledge, lack of skills. So by introducing AI into education, we are helping in terms of driving the social ills. AI in healthcare could be one of the areas in which and there's no reason why we can't be doing that in South Africa as well. I think we could reinvest and change direction of some of the investment we're making somewhere else into driving AI in the social space as well.
And then skill, you touched on it in terms of introducing AI at a foundational level for children, etc. Yes, universities don't have an excellent, shall we say, uptake at the moment in terms of courses available, but do we have enough of a talent pool for what the industry needs in the country? And how do we retain that skill? Because the people I know who've taken this route, a lot of them now are based in London, in Dubai, etc.
Yeah, I think we need to make it attractive for people, for individuals that have a skill in AI to stay in. So we need to have retention policies that talk to more than just giving them money. We need to give them a bigger purpose. And one of the things we need to start thinking of is why we're doing AI and what sort of growth are we expecting to see in there. Because I think when you have a bigger purpose, that's probably the reason why people stay in organizations. But I actually was just checking somewhere else. The thing about AI and AI projects is not all of them are successful. So 90% of the companies that have been interviewed in South Africa actually said we had delays in our project. Right? First, because there's no clarity around why you're doing AI in the first place. My view is you got to look at your business strategy and plug in AI rather than the other way around. AI cannot be a strategy on its own. It needs to supplement what you're trying to do. The second part is actually just, quite frankly, lack of skill. We just do not have enough skills to take advantage of the AI opportunity in there. But not all is lost. I've seen some free courses being offered by other organizations where people can log in and get the base and fundamentals around AI, because it starts from there. You start by enabling yourself. So my view is we actually need to drive those free AI courses, make sure that people are aware of them and get to understand what AI and its opportunities can bring onto us.
And for the companies on the continent then that are grappling with these questions, when HPE comes in, how do you help them take the insight that they might have and turn it into actual impact? Yes, it's great to have this idea, but it has to turn a profit, right?
Yeah.
For the sustainability of the organization and the people who depend on it.
Yeah. So our approach is really around. We start from from a consulting perspective. So we run what we call transformation workshop for businesses, which says if you put tech aside, what value can you derive from AI as an example? So we spend a lot of time working with organizations, first of all, to understand what their visions and priorities are, and then going back and putting together what we call transformation roadmaps and how they could leverage AI to drive in that. Because I think in many cases when we lead with AI, it becomes a little confusing for people that might have invested in technology and they're wondering, when am I going to get a benefit out of this tech? So sometimes taking a step back and really driving it from the business and down to tech is the approach that we find working for most organizations.
And for HPE itself, when do you decide which direction to move?
Yeah.
And when?
Yeah.
In a fluid world where every other person thinks they've got the next best idea.
Yeah. So HPE, actually, we've got, call it a mergers and acquisition and investment arm called HPE Pathfinder. So you got people that are sitting at the head office actually eyeing the next trend. What is the next biggest trend? And we will proactively either reach out to organizations or invest in certain technologies to drive out of that.
Your people are calling. Tell us more about Pathfinder and how it works.
It's actually very interesting. So if you look at the companies we've been acquiring in the past few years, surprise, surprise, they're mainly software companies. So we bought a company called Morpheus. Just purely to take advantage of hybrid cloud and cloud management. And before that, we bought a company called Opsram, because what happens in the tech space is when you're now running complex environment, one of the key things that you battle with is what is sitting where. So observability becomes very key. So we've been proactively actually monitoring trends. In fact, one of the best stories that I like telling is a few years back, we bought a local company called Cape Networks.
Right.
Still based here in Cape Town. They're still operating from there, actually owned by worldwide shareholders. So it's a good South African story, because you know what this company does is, if you think of it, when you're sitting on a Wi-Fi and you see all full bars, does not necessarily mean that you're having the best application performance or you're actually getting the best from the service that you're getting. So what this company does, it actually provides insights. So they'll put a device that provides insight that says, we see Tembekile is connected, but actually the application is trying to access, has performance issues. Would you, in the back end, without you even noticing from an end user perspective, would you in the back end please fix the following in order to give him better performance? And that's a good South African story that came out of Pathfinder, actually. And we still have the guys based in Cape Town. In fact, that's our third office. I like visiting the guys in there, because every time I go in there and I go to the demo room and you look at some of the engineering work that they're doing, and I'm talking guys that with PhDs that are actually designing all of these devices, and we're exporting the IP from South Africa to the rest of the world.
So it sounds to me as though the approach taken by HPE then is more towards a diversified portfolio where, yes, they operate perhaps from the outside looking in as individual entities, but it all, at the end of the day, comes together. Am I right?
That's what it is. So, like I said, three key things. So we're building one of the most robust networking. So we acquired a company called Juniper Networks, which actually completes our networking business. So with connectivity, as I mentioned, as a challenge, and that's what we're trying to address, ensuring that people are connected and that they have access to that. So we acquired Juniper Networks because of their expertise in AI. So certainly in AI, you need two things in networking. First, you need what I call the foundation. Right. So the building blocks around networking. So you need what we call networking for AI. What building blocks do I have to get people connected? And you need AI for networking, which says, now that I'm connected, how do I operationally make sure that there's little devices, either in a mine, if you think IoT or IoT stuff, or in a manufacturing plant, are actually working autonomously in terms of driving that. So that's one. And coupled with that is where we process data with hybrid cloud and store it. And the last one, obviously, is taking advantage of AI technology. So you can see the connectedness of our strategy around those three building blocks.
And for the smaller guys, as we come to the end of our conversation, At what point does one branch out, diversify your portfolio, as the business people say, and break away from, in fact, let me phrase it this way. When is it best to create a niche for your organization, a credible niche that people trust?
Yeah.
And when do you then branch out and begin to add other layers to what you offer to the market?
So diversification is very key. I think I used the Middle East example. That applies to you and I. That applies to any other sort of business. I think it's important that you monitor the trends. My view is, if you think of any market right now, there isn't no opportunity where tech can actually play a role. Even in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis, I think it's really, really opening up your eyes and saying, how can I become more productive, more creative, more innovative, leveraging tech?
How do I beat this robot and keep my job?
How do you beat this robot? Maybe you can program the robot if you can beat it. So, and we'll still need human beings, just by the way, because I know there's a big talk around, with the uptake of agentic AI, will a human being still be needed? And my view of that is that human beings that do not understand AI might be replaced by AI. But human beings that actually understand how AI works will always have an upper advantage. So if you think of some of the decision makings that we need to make, still needs a lot of human intervention. And what AI is doing is kind of like simplifying all of that and putting it in front of us and say, if these are the permutations, what's your call as a human being? Yeah.
That brings us nicely then to our landing strip, because all season we've been asking each guest what AI means to them. So what does AI mean to you?
Yeah, to me, it's a big thing, right? I think it's a massive opportunity. And I'll go back to, if you think of it, you and I, $15.7 trillion. I think what we need to think of is whether we're consumers, whether we're part of the people that are innovating, whether we're part of the organization that actually are bringing AI into the forefront, we need a piece of the pie, also at a personal level and also as part of our growth as well. So I think I'm challenged to think, how can I innovatively think on a day-to-day basis? Because in many times when I'm sitting with other C-level executives, the question is, how do I leverage tech into driving that? So the biggest challenge for me is, I'll almost need to be a step ahead. I need to understand the trends. I need to understand how tech can actually assist leaders in organization take advantage of AI and tech in general.
President Ntuli, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you, head of HPE South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us on AI Impact Talk. And that'll do it for this edition. We're back with you with another exciting guest soon. So keep your eyes out on the AI Impact Talk page with me, Tembekile Mkhototo, to see who will be sitting across from me next. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. This episode is proudly brought to you by the Afrocentric Group, Southern Africa's most diversified healthcare group, building a winning health offering.